It's time to accelerate. Hi, this is Andy. Welcome to another edition of Frontline Friday with my regular and very special guest, Bridget Gleason. Now, before we get to the show, Bridget and I have a favor to ask of you. Really appreciate it. If you took time right now to leave a review for this show on iTunes, and while you're there, click the button, subscribe to Accelerate. Make sure you get Frontline Friday automatically each week. Also, we need to hear from you. More specifically, we need your sales questions. What can we answer for you? What challenges do you have that we can help you with? So go to accelerate.fm/frontline and enter your question there. Each month, we're going to select one listener's question to be the question of the month. And the winner will receive a $50 Amazon gift card. So remember, go to accelerate.fm/frontline to give us your question and maybe win $50. So Bridget, how are you today?
I'm doing excellent. Super. Fantastic.
There you go.
Great.
Got to make sure you get the right word in there.
I know. All of it. I'm doing fantastic.
Excellent. Excellent. Good to hear.
And you? How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you. So I just arrived in California. Life is good.
Well, I will say that the weather has turned beautiful here in Boston. So life is good as well.
All right. Well, hey, there we go. And you got your run in this morning?
Always. Did the sun come up? Yes. If
True.
the sun comes up, I typically get my run in.
Got it. All right. I envy you. I haven't done that yet, but going to head out here shortly and do that. So today I thought it's been a while since we talked about books. Books we've been reading. Always a favorite episode of people. So is there a book you've been reading that or have read recently that's sort of stood out?
I was thinking about this just based on our last conversation. Nothing that I'm reading that really stands out. I'm always reading a book. So I've reread some of the Sandler books because it's something that the team all here knows Sandler. So I've reread some of the Sandler books, which are always good.
Yeah. What'd you think about rereading them though? Upon rereading them, what did you think?
I think that they're sound and the principles are, pretty basic. For me, the importance of picking a sales methodology is just that we're all speaking the same language. Mm-hmm. So I just want to understand when they use a term that we're all speaking the same language. So I think Sandler is good for that. It's so funny. I don't know if it's a Boston thing, but everybody has Sandler. People have been Sandler trained, and so that just seems
Sandlerized.
They've been Sandlerized. You go out to San Francisco, it's you get a lot of people that have John Barrows. I know a lot of people have used him. Jocko, a lot of people have used. Sure. There's a bit more of a mix, but out here, it's almost to everybody I've hired has been Sandler trained.
All right, so let me ask you a question because this is
okay.
Yeah,
bring it on. Bring it on.
You like it when I do that?
I do. I can hardly wait.
So you're talking about methods, and I read this great quote this week, which about methods versus principles. So if you had to identify the core principles of Sandler, what would they be?
If I had to identify the core principles of Sandler to me it's a way of thinking. It is not overly prescribed. And it's about understanding how they talk about upfront contracts, the pain funnel, knowing that people aren't going to make a decision unless you really help them uncover and understand whatever situation it is and the problem or pain that they're having and help them see their way out of it.
Well, so the quote I read it was spoken or written originally by a gentleman named Harrington Emerson. And it's about methods and principles. And I just thought really applied to sales. And so the quote is, as to methods, there may be 1,000,000 and then some, but principles are few. The man who grasps principles can successfully select his own methods. The man who tries methods ignoring principles is sure to have trouble.
Love that.
As do I, because I think principles in sales are way more important than methods. So, and we talked about this like my little bald acronym that I'd come up with. That's about principles, right? It's not a method. It's just do these 4 things, and it doesn't really matter what method you use. You can be successful.
I love that. Will you send that to me, or put it on your blog, or put it somewhere where I can find it again? I think that's so true, that if you understand the principles, then the techniques and the methodology and those things are much less important. You got to understand you got to know the principles. So that's a really, really great reminder.
Okay, so that sort of gets back to, and not to be critical of Sandler at all, because as you said, lots of people use it, but what are the principles, right? What are the core principles that are really driving the method? Because when you first started talking about it, you sort of defaulted, hey, it's a method.
Yeah.
But I like to understand the principles.
So give me an example of what you mean by principles from another methodology or another. Give me an example.
Well, I mean, like there's you mentioned our mutual friend Jocko Vanderkoy is, he's increasingly talking about sort of a customer-centric approach to sales in the modern sales methodology, modern sales process, let's say, but in a way that says, and sort of based somewhat on Amazon, where Amazon says, look, you start with the customer and work your way backward. To me, that's a core principle, right? And it informs all the methods that you might establish around how you're going to sell, how you're going to support your customers.
God, it's funny, Andy. I feel like any of the core sales methodologies need to have that as an underlying principle. So I would say Sandler, there's definitely a focus on, the customer. Is there one that doesn't have that as an underlying principle?
Well, so we're going to stray a little bit far field from the subject of the day, but that's fine. We'll come back
That's
to
all
it.
right.
It's my show. We can do whatever we want.
That's exactly right. You can change the topics. You can do whatever.
Right. Okay. So, let's see. So, ask your question again.
Well, I guess I look at the sales methodologies that I think stick and that are effective. They have, to me, they're based on some kind of the same fundamental principles, and they do revolve around the customer and helping them to understand where their issues are, and just to accompany them on this buyer's journey, and really to be their kind of a shepherd through it. And they're very customer centric or prospect centric.
Well, let me ask you a question about, because we talk a lot on the show and on our episodes together. We talk about sales automation, sales technologies, and so on. So I was thinking about this recently because I've had a number of conversations with CEOs and founders on the show of new technologies that are coming out. In some cases, they've come out, but some are not quite there. But I asked the same question about them. So we look at all this, what's that, sales automation technology, machine learning, AI coming into the sales space. And the question I ask people, I says, okay, how does this technology help the customer make a decision? Because everything we're doing with this technology is about the salesperson and the sales process. But how does it help the customer? And so if we're really being customer centric, is where are the apps that say, yeah, and there are some that we can ferret out and talk about, but that are really geared toward helping the customer do what they're setting out to do, which is to quickly gather the information they need to make good decisions with the least investment of their time and effort possible.
Okay.
So it's sort of that, okay, we've got these methods as embodied in some of these technologies that, because we've intertwined many of our processes with the automation technologies, but where's the customer in that whole equation?
Well,
and so to me, that's like, well, that's methods without principles.
Now we're definitely getting into semantics and those kinds of things.
I don't know if it's semantics. I think one of the reasons, and Jocko speaks about this very eloquently, is that sort of this predictable revenue model, which has been wholeheartedly embraced throughout the Valley, is tottering somewhat, right? I mean, it has some real issues that are going to have to be addressed, and collectively we're going to work on those and address those. But it's it's sort of being driven by this process, which is all about activity, which is all about the salesperson, not really about the customer. And so, again, without parsing that too finely, I was saying, okay, yeah, we've really sort of focused everything we're doing on the methods without really thinking about the underlying principle, which is, and we can start with the Amazon one is being obsessed with the customer, and then our processes flow out of that.
Yeah. Okay. So if I hear what you're saying, part of it could be that we've gotten so focused on the methodology that we forget the underlying principles, which I think were originally, some of these methodologies were inspired by good principles, but we may have we've over-rotated on focusing on a methodology as opposed to the underlying principle. Because I think when I think about the methodologies, the good ones, and the way that I think about sales just in general is that I'm here to help. I'm here to help. And if I have something that is helpful to you, that's going to solve a problem that you're having, if there's a good fit, I want to be a facilitator for that. And I want to help. So the tools and techniques that I use are in service of me trying to help you. And if I'm good at asking the right questions and developing some rapport and understanding a natural sequence of how you might think about discovering and learning about products and services, if I can be adept at those techniques, in the end, I'm going to accomplish what really for me as a salesperson has always been my underlying goal and principle, which is, can I help you?
Oh,
is this potentially something that will be
right, which is where we should be.
Right. And so I think, but
we're not, though. And that's I think the thing that is of real concern to me is that, especially again, sort of in the more the spaces and the marketplaces where the automation has come more to the fore in what people want to quote unquote call modern sales teams and so on, is I think the customer gets lost. Now, it's not that lip service isn't paid to it, but I think the customer gets lost.
Okay, so I would agree. I would agree with that the customer does get lost, but I don't know that that's necessarily because it's the methodology isn't based on good principles.
Well, perhaps. So let me give you one example though. So I'm a member of an online community all about modern selling, and there's, gosh, I imagine there's, at this point I've heard there's like 1,000 members or more that contribute, and every day there's a bunch of questions that are posted that people contribute answers to. But as I go back and scan the questions that are asked, fully 90%, if not a higher percentage, have nothing to do with the customer. So what I'm saying is 90-95% of the conversation has nothing to do with the customer. It's all about process and technology and sales operations, sales enablement. But where's the customer in these discussions?
What would be a question that could be posed?
I'm working on this deal. We've run into this objection. How can you help?
Oh, I see.
Somebody asking a question about, I'm dealing with a customer and I have this problem, or we're trying to, break into this type of account that does these things. But, almost none of the discussion, I just find it very curious. Almost none of the discussion is about that. And to me, it sort of reflects what I see when I work with companies and talk to, CEOs, as I do, every week, 6 times a week Yes, so it seems like sort of a trend, and where's that trend end? And to me, it doesn't end in a good spot. And so when I see what like Jocko's doing and talking more about it's not, we go through these phases, we talk about customer-centric selling, right? It's not new. I mean, Michael Bosworth wrote about this back, 20 plus years ago. But we sort of seem to go through these waves where we sort of wake up and say, oh, yeah, where's the customer in all of this? And yeah, I think we're clearly overdue for another wave.
Well, I've had Jocko come to train several of my teams. So I brought him in at more than one place, and he's he's amazing. He's fantastic. I think Jocko is great. And we focus on the customer, but we also, there were a lot of techniques and so I guess I don't know that we've maybe, I don't know that I think it's as dire as I think you do. Maybe that's it. Like, I think that,
well, I don't think the world's going to end.
I don't think the world's, if the world ends, it's going to be for other reasons.
Yeah, it's not because, it's not because the sales doesn't have enough customer focus.
Exactly.
Yeah, we have other threats, but I do think
that are real.
But I do think that, and I'm not alone in this, that, you know, certain of the sales models that are very popular these days are not sustainable and are going to have to evolve fairly substantially over the next 2 to 3 years if, you know, companies are really going to say, yeah, how do we really address and help and support our customers? How do we become, as Amazon talks about, you know, obsessed with the customer?
Yeah, and I think a lot of it is figuring out how do we, in the changing landscape that we're in, with regards to how people buy and how they find information and seek information, how do we stay obsessed and focused on them? Or I don't know where to go find them. I don't know how to interact with them. I don't know how to, I think the two sort of go hand in hand. I think we're at a place where we're trying to figure out, okay, things are changing, and the way that the customer wants us to interact with him or her is changing. And so how do I do that? Are there tools that will help me do that better in a way that the customer will find less offensive or to be more helpful?
Well, yeah, less offensive is certainly important. But
I think it's true.
Well, I think you're identifying the key need that exists in the marketplace, is that it's, you know, sales automation technology, just broadly saying sales automation technology, that it really comes at from the perspective of the customer and does just exactly what you said. And I think somebody's going to be smart and come up with that, and that is going to be fairly transformational. You
know, we talk a lot here at Logs.io about, because we sell a technical product, we sell to developers and DevOps and IT, and we talk a lot to our co-founders and engineers about their perspective and their eyes and how they want to buy and their viewpoints. We really try to understand, how do you want to be communicated to? What's going to be effective? What messages are going to resonate? And maybe that doesn't always sound like it's very customer centric, but we're really trying to not be offensive. We're really trying to, if we have something that we think could be beneficial, what's the best way for us to start a conversation or let you know about it? Like, what's the best way for us to do it? And sometimes that does start to revolve around, or look like it's more around techniques than it does. Are we focused on the customer? Yeah, well, so getting back to books, because this is a good time to bring. Yeah, let's go. This is related. So a book I read this week, and the guest I interviewed for the show, whose interview will be on after this airs, but people should make sure they pay attention to the schedule and make sure they catch this one. The guest was a guy named Stephen Shapiro, and he's an innovation expert. He's written a number of books, but the one that I'd read, and I had him on the show because I wanted to talk about it, and the name of the book is Best Practices Are Stupid. And I thought, okay, well, that at least it's a provocative title. Great title. And basically what he believes is that it's not that
best practices per se are bad, but it's the way they're pretty much adopted by companies and implemented. He calls it business plagiarism. What happened is that they, in his mind, in his experience, he used to run like a 20,000 person group at Accenture, and speaks to companies and works with big companies around the world. Is that what happens when we grab best practices and they repress innovation? People stop thinking, and we see this happening in spades in, certainly, we'll say, in Silicon Valley with this whole predictable revenue sales model, right? Everybody's just sort of adopted it, and oftentimes without thinking, this is how we're going to sell, right? If we have a SaaS business, this is how we're going to sell. And I think, the end result is we're sort of coming to this point where, it's not a one size fits all, and it's, at least based on some data I've seen recently, the success rates are dropping and so on. So he makes a really compelling case about a couple of things that I thought were great ideas. And one was, don't think outside the box, make a better box. I love that. And that was one about, every time we're trying to innovate, let's say we're trying to innovate on a sales models, we sort of think, gosh, we got to start all over from scratch and come up with something new. And we're saying it's not like the basic sales models we're using are fundamentally bad, but we have maybe some misplaced focus and so on. Is how can we fix what we have, right? Let's identify the 3 challenges or 2 challenges we have with the model, and let's fix those. And that constitutes real innovation. That's how you start transforming. So in that case, I'd be advocating, okay, we've got these models that have success doing certain things. Is how do we bring the customer into it? And one of the things he talks about is, if you're innovating, he says, adopt, sort of the point you were just making. He said, adopt what he called the Indiana Jones principle, which was, you don't go survey your customers, you go in the field and you talk to your customers. And this is the thing I see is just missing completely in so many companies. Yes, again, especially as we fall more to the subscription model where travel budgets are tight and you're trying to do everything remotely. As he points out, there's never a substitute for actually going into the field and spending time with your customers, talking to them, seeing, not just getting the data for how they're using your product, but watching people actually use it, right? And see how it integrates into their business in person. And I think that, to me, that was sort of common sense, but it's one that just doesn't happen much anymore. We're trying to do so much remotely and virtually, which understandably we need to from an economic standpoint, but we have to spend more time with our customers.
Well, and I'll tell you, just as salespeople are spending more time remotely, our customers are more often remote. They're not necessarily sitting in the office. They're not always wanting to have the face-to-face either.
Sure.
So the world's changing on both sides. So in terms of also being customer-centric, our customers don't want to see us in the way that they did in the day, which I will say is the same day that you had a long time ago.
Well, I'm much younger than you are, though.
Yeah, well, so I think that's changing also. So it's not even just that it's
absolutely.
It's not just a restriction on the part of the sales side. It's also a restriction on the customer side, that they are not wanting it as much as they did in the day. So I think it's changing. It's changing.
But it's a matter of degree, right? Because it's one thing to say, we're going to go sell them the way we did before, which is to your point. But they're not going to sit through 5 different or 6 different, depending on the product or service, in-person meetings to make a decision. But you could sell virtually, but you still need to go out and see the customer, right? And this is not talking about specifically the salespeople, but somebody needs to go. And this is a part that I think is missing. And as part of my conversations I've had with people over the last 2 years, I've asked the question of 400 of these experts that have come on the show. If you ran into a stall, if you hit a plateau in your sales and you had to turn things around, what would you do first? And it's sort of one of the biggest chunks of answers that came back was, get out of the office, go talk to your customers. Not that they necessarily, make a routine of that's how you're going to sell them, but you got to get out and go talk to them. And again, sort of talking about principals being obsessed with the customer, we need to spend more time in general with customers.
Yeah, I will 100% agree with that.
Yeah.
Don't we think we should end on something we agree on?
Well, I don't think that was the only thing.
No, that's not the only thing.
Okay.
For sure.
But that's a good place to end. And I think we can urge people to say, how do we fit this in to our processes that we're going to go, as I said, not just send a SurveyMonkey survey to our customers. We're going to actually go visit them.
Yep.
And not just the ones that are the happiest ones, but go visit some that didn't buy from you. There were prospects that ended up not buying from you, or go visit the ones that churned and find out why they churned and maybe what you could do to get them back. I mean, it's as well as the happy ones.
+1.
All right. Perfect. Bridget.
Andy.
As always.
Until next time.
Until next time. And friends, thank you for spending this time with us.
Have a great weekend, everybody.
Have a great weekend. If you haven't had the opportunity to do so far, go to iTunes or wherever you listen to this podcast. Make sure you subscribe and leave a review for us. And we've had a bunch of reviews, actually, but I haven't had anybody specifically review Frontline Fridays. If you get a chance, really appreciate if you go do that. And until next week, this is Andy.
And this is Bridget. Talk to you next time.